This episode is brought to you by JLL. Get an insider view into the world of commercial real estate with JLL's podcast, Trends and Insights, the Future of Commercial Real Estate. Whether you're curious about making cities more sustainable, the evolution of office space, or AI opportunities, this podcast will help keep you a step ahead. Tune in for candid conversations with business leaders about the biggest trends impacting how we live, work, and play. Subscribe to Trends and Insights now at jll.com/podcast.
Today on CityCast Boise, it's an election year. Who's running to represent the Treasure Valley at the State House? Hey Boise newsletter editor Blake Hunter is taking a look at some new names in the mix. And the GOP is trying to curb the power ballot initiatives. Plus, are we finally catching up to the food truck trend? It's Friday, March 8th. I'm Nick Kwa, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy Friday, Blake.
Yeah, happy Friday.
How are you keeping? How have you been since the last time I saw you? What's going on?
I feel like this week went by really quickly, and we're suffering in winter. We're back in winter a little bit. We still have a lot more light, so I'm always going to be talking about light.
Oh, that's it. I mean, you got to get your sat lamp, get your light bulbs. This entire year has been passing before my eyes. I just cannot believe that's about to be spring, and it's just like a lot of news I'm still buried under. I've been keeping up with the past few episodes of Friday Run News Roundups that y'all been doing, and I still feel like it's falling like sand through my fingers. And so I'm grateful that you're here today, because I need a little bit of help getting myself situated with particularly this first story that we're going to talk about. I am sort of just processing the candidate filings that are coming in. So just in case it somehow slipped your mind, it's 2024. It's an election year. And that doesn't just mean the presidency. Of course, like we have a lot of races up and down the chain. Both our senators are not up for re-election this year, but we're talking local legislative races. We're talking people who are germane to your districts. And an important part of this process, the kickoff, some would say, is the candidate filing. It's only 10 days that folks can file for the candidacy, and it opened on Monday, March 4th, and it runs until next Friday, March 15th. And already we're seeing a couple of interesting things. Blake, do you want to walk me through a couple of things that stood out?
Yeah, so a couple of the big ones that jumped out to me. So a kind of stretch barrier for like Boise legislative districts that really matters, like 10 through 23. Really, it's fewer than that, but a few that looked interesting to me, which I noticed that you noted as well, as Senate District 15. So that's going to be, we currently have a Democrat, Rick Just, in that seat. He's running against Cody Galloway, who was previously in the House, I believe, as a Republican in Meridian. And they ran against each other back in 2022, and she lost. Rick Just kind of pulled through. It was a relatively close race, and so we're going to be seeing a rematch there. And then also I'm looking at 16B for the House. So, these House seats, for folks who might not know, these House seats have two seats per district, and then there's just one senator per district. So for 16B, we actually have 4 Democrats running, which is a rare phrase that anyone in Idaho ever says. So we have John Chu, who I'm actually not familiar with, Nixon Matthews, who we had on the podcast just last week to talk about some like anti-trans legislation, Todd Achilles, who's actually serving currently because he's filling in for Colin Nash, who's now a city councilor, and Wayne Ritchie. So we have four Democrats running, and so that'll be a really interesting race.
Wait, Wayne Ritchie's a Democrat?
He's filed as one. So
that's super funny, because Wayne Ritchie, for background, ran for mayor in the first race that McLean won. So that would be before the pandemic, 2019.
19, yeah.
And boy, did he ran on a what we could call a unique platform, which is he's serving none of the newcomers that are into Boise.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I mean in 2019 there were so many names. I wasn't paying attention. It was a really competitive field. So that name's starting to sound familiar now. Interesting. Yeah. So that, I mean, have a character like that in there. That's going to be a fun race, and 4 people. Also, House 17. So that is Representative Sue Chu has been serving for so long. And shout out to her. I remember going to Boise State, and she, out of all the legislators, I mean, I think she did such a good job at like incorporating students into the mix and really trying to get students out there, which is such an important process.
Yeah. Had the name for a long time.
Yeah, and so she's just a great person. And so she is actually not serving right now because of health issues. And we might have a completely new face in the legislature representing Boise in Megan Egbert. She's currently the only person who's filed to run for her seat. So that's what I'm looking at. And then a lot of like kind of the big names, big legislative names for both Senate and representative seats in the Boise area have refiled with not a lot of competition, but there's still time for other folks to jump in the pool if they want to.
Just going back to District 16 for just a quick second, do you have a sense of why it's so competitive this cycle?
I mean, not a definitive one, but if you think about, so District 16 is Winstead Park, some of the West Bench area, and so that's an area that it's a little bit of a juggle place as far as where it's going to lie politically, because obviously as you move further west into Meridian territory, it's going to get more conservative. And then you have parts like Winstead Park, which are just like pretty close to downtown Boise. So there's quite a bit of a mix there. But it's like well-established neighborhoods, but yeah, an interesting political mix there. And so we saw that even in the city council race back in November.
Right, I was going to say that was the part of town that had been the most quote-unquote dynamic as a result of the redistricting.
Yeah, and so you have a few different really active kind of prominent parties there. So we had Colin Nash, kind of, he's new to the city council, but he'd been a legislator before, and so he's kind of like an established Democratic candidate. We had an older Democratic candidate running, kind of supporting Masterson and saying he was worried about where the city was going. And then you had kind of more of a right-wing figure saying that they really wanted the city to be run differently, had a lot of views on Boise pride and whatnot. And so, yeah, there's a really interesting mix there. And I feel like that is one that's going to keep being it's going to keep changing. I feel like over time, I feel like we might see some races where it totally swings one way or the other. So we'll see what happens here.
Awesome. So, just to recap yet again, we are in the middle of the sort of filing window. And so a lot of the textures there's a lot more races that we'll probably see the textures change by the end of the window next Friday. And once again, just in case you need that primer, the relevant districts for Boise is 14 to all the way to 23, I want to say. And if you want to keep track of the filed candidates in real time, there's a database that's being maintained over at voteidaho.gov. Go over to the links section and there'll be a cross tab that you can sort through if you want to see who else has filed. Sticking on the subject of elections and voting, one news story that caught my eye this week. This has been percolating for a couple of weeks now, but we've got a bit of a trigger event this past week. Republicans in the legislature has voted to send House Bill 652 to the floor, and this bill specifically targets a ballot initiative, which, for a state as uncompetitive from a party politics standpoint for a number of years, ballot initiatives have been a primary way for direct democracy to be implemented by the state. And by that, I mean it's a way or it's a mechanism for citizens to get laws and policies on the ballot that's separate and apart from the legislature. There's a lot of dynamics there that we can dig into, but I don't think we have that much time, so we'll just sort of leave it at that. The bill, again, this is House Bill 652, it does a couple of things. It's moving to strike the amount of time allocated for a ballot initiative, struck it down by 1 month. So already that's a constraint on organizers, because the more time you have, the better you can be, or the more allowances you can have to get something onto the ballot. But the more, I think, immediately pressing or the more immediately burdensome would be this new bureaucratic mechanism that compels organizers to report signatures to the county clerk each month. And so that places a huge administrative pressure on people who are trying to get ballot initiatives going, particularly if it's a true grassroots effort. If it's not if it's not a nonprofit, if it's not an institutionalized body, it's harder, right? Much harder to comply with bureaucracies. It's a little bit like, when small businesses kind of are burdened by having to apply for licenses all the time. It's kind of comparable if you want to make that comparison there. Ballot initiatives, I feel, are super important. And I think the last major ballot initiative movement that we've seen was the successful passing off the sort of Medicaid expansion in 2017. So this is something that I'm watching. Blake, is this something that caught your eye too?
Totally. And it was interesting. Losing an entire month of being able to gather signatures is certainly a big deal. But I think that you're right, especially mentioning that organizers have to turn in signatures monthly. And specifically, I want to mention that means that they have to turn it into, like, any signature gathered in, say, Custer County has to be turned into the Custer County clerk. That's all of Idaho's county clerks have to be involved in this process now, every single month during this entire process. So people who are opposed to this bill have really said that this is going to be really burdensome. The legislator kind of, supporting it and sponsoring it has said that, that's not the case at all. We as elected officials have to turn in our campaign finance reports every month. And it's like, yeah, but they're not elected officials. Yeah, this really is worrying. And I want to mention too, 3 years ago, I can't believe that 2021 was 3 years ago, but 3 years ago, a Senate bill was signed by the governor that would have added to the number of signatures required for a ballot initiative to go through. And so, the legislature all gave that their thumbs up, and the Supreme Court ruled against it. The state Supreme Court moved against that and said, the ability to put together legislation through kind of this grassroots effort and is a fundamental people's right in the Idaho Constitution, and really, really stood in protection of that. And so, yeah, I don't know. This really does feel like another effort to kind of tamp down. Republicans have been very vocal about the Medicaid expansion, and they're also, a lot of them are worried about this new open primaries ballot initiative as well. So it's hard not to see this as a rebuke against those efforts.
Right. And just to sort of underline that, the current ballot initiative effort at play is for open primaries here in Idaho.
Yeah.
And that's primarily spearheaded by Reclaim Idaho, which is the body that also got Medicaid expansion going. The interesting thing that thing has long been interesting to me about the open primaries thing is former Governor Butch Otter endorsing that initiative. And
so many other Republicans. Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. And I'm curious to see if this effort to curb the power of ballot initiatives, if we will see any response against this House bill. This is part of a larger effort, it feels like, by the GOP to curtail voting power, and that also includes absentee voting. If that was another bill that was in play this week.
Yeah. So House Bill 667 came through, and this does refer to absentee voting and mail-in voting in general. So currently, Idaho has what's called like a no excuse absentee ballot request process, which I know sounds bad, but it means that you don't have to offer up to your county an excuse as to why you're requesting an absentee ballot. So you can just request one. Just
real mismatch in name and actual
I know.
That's 100%. Incredible.
Yeah. But that would change under this bill and make it so that only someone who is going to be out of town at the time of the election can actually request an absentee ballot. So that's going to throw a big wrench in kind of this trend. If it goes through, that would throw a huge wrench in specifically Ada County. So, this past election in November, twice as many Ada County voters used absentee ballots than we did in 2021. And of course, it was a bigger election, but still, it was a big deal. And I do want to mention that this bill does keep provisions for voters with disabilities, though it's also worth mentioning that Idaho's kind of predictably behind the curve on that as well. Yeah, so the representative who put this forth says that mail-in voting and other forms of absentee voting were kind of never meant to be relied upon, on this big of scale as we're seeing. But it's a trend in general. I think that you got to mention that part of this is that, for example, in the November election, Mayor McLean won 55% of the vote versus 43% that Masterson won. But in absentee voting, she won 68% of it versus his 32%. So this, absentee voting does nationwide seem to trend a little bit in favor of more liberal voters. And so it's kind of seen as that. But I also want to mention that, absentee voting is really helpful for rural voters as well.
Absolutely.
And so that to me is always a little bit perplexing when Republicans are wanting to walk back absentee voting, but we'll see if this goes forward. It's currently up for amendments right now.
Rural voters and also military abroad, so on so forth. If it cuts, the whole point is we want more people voting. We want more democracy. That's the whole point of this.
You would think,
experiment.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Let's talk about food trucks.
Yeah.
So Boise, a budding food truck city. I think we can phrase it that way.
Okay. Do you think we have enough to classify as budding?
Listen, I'm a big Green Acres head, so like
okay, yeah,
maybe
love.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Listen, I'm just gonna call it Boise budding food truck city.
Right. Okay.
But it could be more of a food truck city, and we might actually be heading towards a situation where that could actually be true. So food trucks, the lifeblood these days of modern new enterprises in food and restaurateuring. So at the end of February, a couple of weeks ago, the city council heard a proposal to streamline the process to get food trucks and other, smaller, I think the phrase is mobile food vendors, to get licensed and just basically get operational. Like if you've run any small business, particularly one that requires the handling of food or any sensitive materials, there's a lot of licensing involved. This is a lot of safety checks, and the safety checks are important, right? You don't want somebody serving you a rice bowl that's contaminated with, whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a balance that needs to be struck between the licensing and making sure that everybody who's handling the food is fit to do so, and actually just, not incurring too much of a prohibitive cost burden on the proprietor, on the enterprise owner. And so there's a sort of effort in place to get that a bit more streamlined. Blake, could you walk me through what the proposal that was brought forward to the city council is?
Essentially, you mentioned all of the licenses involved, which if you've never talked to anyone, if you've never been through the process yourself, or you should talk to someone who has, because it's a lot, and it should be for a lot of restaurants, but it's essentially what the city is thinking about doing right now based on this advisement and policy is treating these mobile food restaurants like typical brick and mortar restaurants. So kind of reducing the number of I don't want to call them loopholes because I'm just not as familiar with the the ins and outs of this process. It was pitched as this being kind of a boon for really small business owners, maybe people who, especially just right now, can't afford to buy a building or can't afford to get on a lease for an entire restaurant food footprint because
especially in this city where real estate just rents are going really, really up.
It's just absurd. And so trying to make Boise kind of a more friendly place for food truck owners to get a foot in the door, to get a whale on the ground, you might say. And as you can imagine, like city council responded pretty well to this. As I'm seeing that you are, I'm sensing that you're a bit of a fan of food trucks. Is that?
Oh yeah. I like to walk and eat. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay. All right. Yeah. City council really responded well to this. And anytime that you want to say like, hey, let's help out small business owners in Boise, people are going to be here for it.
Wait, are you not a food truck person?
No, I am. I'm actually really excited about this. I think that I would love to see more just like weird food trucks. Like I want to just start, like I really think that it's such a great ground for experimentation.
When you say weird, what are we talking about? Like a bioluminescent hot dog? Like what kind of weird are we talking
certainly
about?
Not. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what I mean by that. I guess we can just start with more and go from there, because I don't think that we have I think that it's like I want more consistent availability of food trucks, especially in the summer here. So I'm personally excited about this. I think that it'll be a great option.
Oh yeah, I want a taco truck in every corner. I think more is better, right? You start from the standpoint of more is great. The thing that I've always sort of loved about the concept of food trucks is it is the fact that it increases the accessibility for new like entrepreneurs, like for people to have a dish they want to bring out, an idea that they have, and to sort of prototype it and bring it out. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Arthur that's been going out and going up. Turns out that it's probably not going to be the tallest building in Boise when it's finished, but it is sort of a landmark. I think it is, in many senses, a symbol of the changing face of downtown. And something that we talked about is, I think we shared a frustration over the building's seeming focus on luxury housing and how that may or may not actually, help solve the housing affordability crisis that we're seeing in the city. And we capped that segment asking listeners if anybody had insight into how we could actually be sort of imprecise about that assessment, how exactly a building like Arthur could help with housing prices. And it turns out, so we had two reader mail in particular, and they both said similar things. Dana wrote in and just pointed out that even though it shouldn't be the only strategy, even though luxury apartments do serve only one category of a potential renter. The general idea of putting more supply into the market slows down the growth of rent prices just in general on a sort of very fundamental level, because people who would be targeting luxury apartments, if they don't have those units available to them, they will just target everything else, and so their sort of wealth will be applying pressure across the board in general. So luxury apartments availability just serves as a minor release valve for that particular demographic. And of course, over time, I think people on the sort of lower end of the income spectrum, as they develop in their careers and develop in their households, they might price up into that segment. So Dana pointed that out, and another listener, Alexandra, she writes, by the way, and she also points out the sort of dynamic on the supply side. She writes, by the way, new apartments are usually luxury because that is what is possible to build with how commercial real estate is financed. It's not a simple swap to build a market rate versus affordable apartment. She later writes, if the choice for redevelopment of a surface parking lot is more luxury housing or no housing, in her opinion, the better result is more luxury housing over time. Again, this is supporting this idea, like, if the choice is between a certain kind of housing and no housing, go with the one.
Yeah, I do too. And I agree. Like, yeah, if you want a surface parking lot or luxury housing, obviously go for luxury housing. And however, it's still, I don't know, there's still, yes, we need housing across a broad range of incomes. We need housing that can cater to lots of different kinds of people. I guess it's just some of the attention, which I guess we're part of this problem here, is the attention that we've paid to Arthur, but also because it's so visible. That's a lot of labor also, like the construction kind of market that goes into putting together that building. It's hard to see that and still not think, yeah, but it could be affordable housing that they're working on instead. But at the same time, I do take their point, and yeah, I appreciate that it still helps out to have more in the market.
The point that you raised about labor, I was reading, I believe, maybe the item of press earlier, that there is some concern over just labor supply because large scale construction projects like Arthur downtown, it's not the only large scale construction project that we have in the region. There's a Meta server farm, so not too far from Boise, that's still being built. It's going to require a lot of labor, and I think Minecraft also has a couple of expansions. So boy, it seems like we're in a real moment of flux here. I just want to flag two more things on the story. One is, a good friend, Frankie Barnhill, EP of the show. She has a episode about Arthur specifically coming out soon, digging into a bunch of these dynamics and threads that we've been talking about. And, our friends over at CityCast Salt Lake had an episode in December titled "With Empty Apartments, Are We Really in a Housing Crisis?" that actually does play around and gets into this sort of notion of like the luxury apartments slowing down rate of growth of rents in the region. And I think if you're Salt Lake City, Boise, different cities, but have similar dynamics, if you're interested in digging into more of that, check out that episode. Anything else you want to add on this, Blake?
I don't think so. Obviously, we're going to keep talking about housing for a long time.
For the rest of our lives, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's close this out by sort of previewing our respective weekends. Hopefully it's fun. I'm not a terribly fun person, but I try to make my weekends more fun. Blake, what's on your calendar? What's on your radar this weekend?
Mine is going to be largely dominated by this, just bonkers event that's happening at Jump. It's called Illumibrate. It's Jump's kind of like biggest event.
Sorry, Illumibrate? Is that...
Illumibrate.
Okay.
I don't know. Somebody tell us why it's called. No, I'm sure we could find why it's called that. But basically, part of the reason that I'm going to be going to it and kind of paying attention to it is because I'm part of the group Backyard Artists, which we've had one of their organizers.
Oh, you're
Ryan
part
Marsh.
of that's awesome. I didn't know you were part of.
Yeah. So I'm part of that group and thrilled to be involved. And I'm like one of the only members of the team who isn't either sculpting something for this or like my partner's doing the music for one of the rooms. And so it's just like taken over my life and I'm not even involved. So, last year, like thousands of people went. It really is like one of Jump's biggest events of the year. And it's free, it's free art, all family friendly. So that's a really good thing for people to go check out this weekend because it's 6 floors of just like all these local artists who have been working together on these huge projects for so long. And there's so many different landscapes. This year's theme is dreams, which I love. So I'm excited to see it all come together this weekend, and it's running from like 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturday. So, you've got time. It's free, like I said, but you do have to register. So gonna be excited for that.
That's awesome. And that's organized by Backyard Artists, or?
So it's kind of through Jump, but Backyard Artists is taking on the Pioneer Room. So they've filled up the 6th floor room, and then completely different groups of artists are responsible for all the other rooms. So it's kind of just this crazy conglomeration that's come together.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I might actually check that out.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, if the weather's good.
Maybe morning, I would recommend.
Oh, really? I mean, it sounds, with the word like an illuminate or illuminate or whatever, you would imagine going when it's dark.
Yeah, that's true. But however, I mean, I know that last year about like 800 people showed up at the same time. So I would try to pick a good time to go.
Okay. I'll take that tip. As for me, I am I'm really just hunkering down and preparing for the Oscars. I had to do some work around that for my day job, but mostly I'm here to just make a crap ton of popcorn, dress up inside my own house and watch the red carpet. It's gonna be a 4 or 5 hour affair. I love it every year. It's I don't throw Oscar parties in my own house, but I really should. We do it up.
But I mean, like you said yesterday with the Flicks co-owner Carol Skinner on the podcast, I agree. Oscars parties aren't really worth it because people talk, and I'm not here to listen to you, buddy. I'm sorry.
You're so right. The thing that I hate the most watching television with other people is hearing other people talk.
I know.
Apologies to my wife. Awesome. Blake, thanks so much. I hope you have a Illumi-Brady weekend.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. You too. I can't come up with an Oscars pun right now, but I hope that all of your picks win.
Awesome. Actually, I am in a pool. I hope I win too.
Even though your picks are wrong, but anyway.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show was produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Dylan Brogan, and me, Nick Qua. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and Adrian Gonzalez edited them this week. Our music is by Up Is the Down Is the. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. Tell a friend about us. We'll be back Monday with more stories from around the city. Later.